Okay, go ahead, Counselor.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, everybody, and welcome for joining us this morning for some very great news about the Toronto Public Library. My name is Paul Ainsley. I'm the City Councillor for Ward 24 Scarborough-Guildwood, the Chair of the Federation of Ontario Public Libraries, and most importantly this morning, I am also a very proud member of the Board of Directors of the Toronto Public Library. Joining me this morning are Mayor John Tory, Sue Graham-Nutter, the chair of the Toronto Public Library Board, Sarah Fulford, who is the chair of the Toronto Public Library Foundation, and also joining us to answer questions that you may have about our announcement today is Vickery Bowles, our city librarian, and Jennifer Jones, who is the president of the Toronto Public Library Foundation, for today's amazing announcement. And without any further ado, it's my great pleasure to introduce Mayor John Tory. Over to you, Mayor Tory.
Well, Paul, thank you, and good morning, everybody. And I want to acknowledge as well the presence today, not only of yourself, Paul, because Paul has been a longstanding member of the library board and takes a keen interest in that. And you know, I think a lot of people take the libraries for granted, and I don't think that we should, because they are an incredible asset that I've come to appreciate more and more in this job. Although, you know, I will say in my own case, you know, my appreciation for the libraries goes all the way back to when I was a boy, and every Saturday morning, regular as clockwork, when it wasn't hockey time, we would be over at the library for what then was story time. We would read sitting in a circle on the floor, and it was just one of many things that made it kind of a center of neighborhood activity then. And the role of the libraries has changed dramatically since then, and it just serves an unbelievably important purpose, which I'll make reference to. But Paul has been a steadfast supporter of that, and of course, Vickery, Sue, and Sarah and Jennifer are people who make it all work. And you know, in the case of Sue and Sarah, they are doing their work as community members, and that is deeply appreciated by their city and by the mayor, because we need people to step forward who have a passion for this and who carry out these kinds of responsibilities on behalf of all of the people who live in the city of Toronto. So I say thank you to them. This today, what we're here for is not the biggest announcement in terms of you know, finances within the context of a sort of $14 billion city budget, or even a library budget that is within the hundreds of millions of dollars. But it is very important as an important step forward in terms of accessibility to something that I just said was a hugely important center of our communities across the city. You know, we don't realize that I have ended up, since I've been mayor, I'll admit since then, because I learned more about it, talking about our library system all the time as a huge asset that we can talk to when we're trying to attract investors, when we're trying to talk about our quality of life, when we're trying to talk about ways in which we can produce greater equity in the city. I always end up, you know, talking about the library system, and people are sometimes astounded when you talk about the size and scale of our system. It is the world's busiest urban public library system, with more than 100 branches, and that is something about which you're very proud to have bragging rights, and something where you want to keep it going and keep you know, make sure that we stay on top. And the libraries have become it's not just a big system. I mean, that, you know, bragging rights for the size of the system is one thing, but the role that the libraries play is quite another, that makes it even more important. It's a kind of safe space, an educational space, a space where people can learn and be themselves. And you know, from those days when I went to Saturday morning story time, and when we went over with our school classrooms for the occasional visit, which was always a source of great excitement, not just because we were getting out of class, but we enjoyed going to the library. It's gone way beyond that. And of course, it isn't just about kids, although today's announcement is about kids, and the libraries are very much about kids, but it's about just adults who go to the library to do all kinds of things now that were never in the contemplation, I don't think, quite frankly, back in the day when we went there on Saturday morning. These are places where people can access all kinds of things in terms of supports, in terms of the internet, in terms of materials and books, and in terms of that important sense of community that our libraries bring, perhaps more so than almost anything else. And you know, it's as important to seniors as it is to kids, as it is to people in between. And we proved when I say we proved, I had little to do with it, but I was proud of the fact that our library management and I will say very importantly, our library staff proved how important these places can be by stepping up and doing things like programs for seniors and food security programs during the early stages, especially of the pandemic, and still true, I think, to some extent today. So I want to thank our library staff. They're wonderful people I encounter all the time when I go to library events, for stepping up. You know, they stepped up and they did something that, frankly, we would have been left with huge holes in our food security system had it not been for the ability we had to convert some of our libraries, which had to be closed, unfortunately, into places that could help with food security. And the staff stepped forward and made that happen. They've always stepped up, but I think this was very important. And I think the announcement today is another example of that sheer motivation to improve our quality of life, to improve equity, within the city that, while it's very successful and admired around the world, has its own challenges with regard to equity between and among the people who live here. So what we are announcing today, and it was a part of the 2021 approved budget just approved in the last week or so, is something that is going to remove another barrier, we hope, to use of and access to the library system by removing fines for children. So this means that Toronto Public Library will not charge overdue fines on all children's materials checked out on children's library cards. And it will also bring about the removal of any fines presently outstanding on children's cards once the branches are fully reopened. And this change will come into effect, as that last sentence just implied, once the pandemic is over. We are not charging any fines during the pandemic, and no accounts are blocked due to overdue fines at this time. Children will be able to continue to borrow materials even if they have overdue fines, but as mentioned, those accounts will be rectified after the pandemic is over. This is all happening, and I should say, when one would ask the question, well, why does the Toronto Library System have a foundation? This is so that the foundation, with the support of donors, of course, can do good works. I mean, good works that are in the interest of the city. And the city itself is going to have to step forward going forward, but this that's allowed to start with the help of both the city and the foundation. So this will make the cost of the city $300,000, and this is a good investment for us. But it's also, I believe, the kind of project the Library Foundation was created to support at the same time. For some people, library fines, not being of the magnitude we'd have for, say, speeding tickets, would be nothing more than a minor inconvenience. And for other people, however, it will make the difference between them using the library or not. And the access to the materials, the access to the internet, the programs that are at the library, the whole experience of being at the library, if you decide you're not going to go there, maybe even because you have a fine that's outstanding and you're afraid to walk in the door, is not a good thing. For kids and for adults and for seniors alike, and in this case, especially for kids. And the fines and the fear of fines could stop adults from even applying for a library card for their child who might otherwise start to go there several days a week, even to one of the youth programs that we have operating inside the library, because people have different perspectives on an outstanding fine than some others might have, and the result could be a disconnection between those children who need it the most and their libraries in their local neighborhoods. And we want to make sure that we are making these libraries accessible for everyone without exception. Overdue fines, it's a simple matter of mathematics and analysis that overdue fines do have a disproportionate impact on racialized and low-income communities in the city of Toronto. To paint that picture more vividly with numbers, 5% of children from these communities have blocked library cards because of overdue fines on the present state of accounts, compared to 1% of children in other areas of the city. So I think that tells you all that you need to know. And if they have their library card blocked, they're probably not going to go to the library. They certainly can't use their card. And we're left with the people who need to use the libraries. I won't say the most, but they certainly have every need to use it, as all other kids do, are not able to use it in the same way. And that's not because, by the way, that people in lower income communities rack up more fines. It's just that they have more trouble, for understandable reasons, paying the overdue balances. And these things, as you know, can kind of multiply on themselves and become something that just can't get looked after. The penalties drive away the very people who stand to benefit the most from the libraries, and we just couldn't continue with the status quo. And that was something that was urged upon us by our chief librarian, who, I should tell you, by the way, is, for those who don't know, whether it's the people watching in the media or more particularly those who might see this in the public, she is an outstanding professional has given nothing but good advice in the time I've been here. She runs the library, which is a big budget operation, in an incredibly business-like way, lest people think this is something where, everybody just makes all of the decisions without regard to the need for prudent financial management. She's the whole deal. And so I thank her very much for her service. Pardon me. So we need to help do everything we can to connect children to the library system and make sure it becomes for them a lifelong source of learning and community and culture and entertainment and all those good things we all know the library system does. So I'm confident that we can do that while at the same time, because people sometimes present these black and white choices that I rarely accept, if ever, that we can do that while actually enhancing that important sense of responsibility that all people, children and adults alike, need to have with regard to the sort of borrowing and return of shared materials. And isn't that what the libraries are all about? Sharing in a way that we never could afford to do on our own, all kinds of materials, whether they be digital or books or a host of other things in between, that we share, and we do it as a shared asset that we all can use. And I'm confident that we can move forward on this new regime with that sense of responsibility intact, and with people feeling now the ability to connect with libraries more often than ever. So I do think this is a very, very important step forward for the City of Toronto, notwithstanding that it'll seem like a small thing. All the small things we're doing, some of which we've learned more about because of the pandemic. And so if there are some silver linings in a lot of those dark clouds, there are things we've seen and learned and done because of the pandemic that will live with us and stay with us, as this will going forward. And so I'm just very gratified that Vickery and her staff brought this forward, that the foundation supported it, and that we will now move forward to implement it. And I would now like to ask the chair of the Toronto Public Library Board, Sue Graham-Nutter, to say a few words. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Mayor Tory, and thank you for your kind words with respect to Vickery, our chief librarian, and the staff. I recognize the important role the library has played, particularly in the early days of the pandemic. As board chair, I believe strongly in TPL's mandate to be free and equitable. That's especially important in a city as diverse as ours, with many newcomers and people of diverse socioeconomic backgrounds. As Mayor Tory said, we're eliminating children's overdue fines in a move to remove barriers to library access, especially for those who need it the most. Fines are a barrier to the use of all library services, including free children's activities, homework help, computer, and Wi-Fi access. With this announcement, TPL joins hundreds of library systems across North America in the growing fine-free movement. In Canada alone, there are over 189 fine-free library systems, including 27 here in Ontario and 9 in the GTA. And these numbers are steadily increasing. Libraries have gone fine-free, report positive responses, and have seen increases in library memberships as a result. We know that libraries open doors to children and inspire them in a very powerful way, and we're excited and determined to welcome even more children to the TPL. I know some of you may be wondering if eliminating fines for kids will mean people will hang on to their books for longer times, meaning longer wait times. We don't expect that to be the case. There's little evidence that fines encourage the prompt return of books. In fact, libraries that have reported fines report the same or an increased return rate of materials. This is partially because of the elimination of fines. People take the opportunity to return library materials they've been hanging on to for a long time for fear of fines, just as the mayor explained. TPL will continue to encourage kids and their parents to return materials on time, and will still be charging for lost or unreturned material. On behalf of the Toronto Public Library members, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Mayor Tory and City Councillor for their initiative and for their belief in the power of the public library to change lives. Particularly during these trying times when so many are facing economic hardship, it's so important that we remove barriers to access. And we'd like to extend our gratitude to the Toronto Public Library Foundation for raising the funds to make the elimination of children's fines possible. We couldn't have done it without their support and the support of their donors to build a stronger city. On that note, I'll hand it over to Sarah Fulford, the chair of the Toronto Public Library Foundation, to say a few words. Over to you, Sarah.
Thanks so much, Sue, and Mayor Tory and Councillor Ainsley. I'm delighted to be with you all this morning. We'd like to join the chorus of fans and cheerleaders here by congratulating Vickery and the staff of the library for being so resilient and creative this past year. Vickery, you have done a tremendous job in incredibly challenging circumstances, and it has been genuinely inspiring to watch. The Toronto Public Library Foundation has been raising funds now for almost 25 years to support the amazing work of Vickery and the Toronto Public Library. Earlier, Mayor Tory asked, why does the library have a foundation? So one of the reasons that I love the fact that the foundation exists is because it provides all Torontonians the opportunity to personally invest in the city with a donation to the library. And by all Torontonians, I mean community level givers and major philanthropic partners alike. Allow me to take this opportunity to say that no gift is too small to have a powerful, positive impact. Today, I am very proud to acknowledge the generous donors who understood the vital need to eliminate kids' fines. They made high impact gifts and should be very much applauded for their generosity. So on behalf of the foundation and my fellow board of directors, I'm extending a huge thank you specifically to the Haynes Connell Foundation, the South Chapter of the Friends of Toronto Public Library, and generous other anonymous donors who believe in the core mission of the library, who believe in free and equitable access to vital library services. Thanks to their support and in partnership with our friends here at the city, we were able to make possible the elimination of fines on children's materials, which will be game-changing for many people in our city. This is a really great day, and this is a year without many great days. So I'm very pleased to be involved in this celebration. Thanks for inviting me to participate in this event. And Councillor Ainsley, I will send it back to you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I really want to appreciate Mary Tory for taking time out of your very busy schedule for being with us this morning. For Sue and Sarah for your comments. My thanks again to Vickery Bowles for all of her leadership as the city librarian. For myself as a city councillor with 5 neighborhood improvement areas in my ward, this is going to go a long way to opening up greater access to what's already one of the top used libraries across North America. So I'd like to thank everybody. At this point, I'm going to hand it over to Lavin to moderate the question and answer session. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Councillor. So just as a heads up, we have Vickery Bowles, the city librarian, on the line as well, and Jennifer Jones, the president of the Toronto Public Library Foundation, if you have any technical questions. First up, we have David Ryder from the Star. David, if you can just unmute yourself before you go.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Just a point of clarification. I just want to understand exactly what materials are fine-free, up to what ages are the kids' cards? And if an adult borrows materials for themselves on a kid's card, is that also fine-free? Can you just elaborate on that a little bit? For the first one, I have a follow-up question.
It's Vickery here. I can answer that question. No, it's fines free includes children's materials borrowed on children's cards. So if an adult borrows adult materials on a children's card, that doesn't work.
Sorry, David.
Yeah, thank you.
Does that answer the question? Yeah.
It does. It just, can you tell me what age are kids up to? Because people are
asking. It's 12. Yes, 12 and under.
Thank
you. Children's cards are eligible to children 12 years and under.
Thank you. I have a non-library question for the mayor. Lavin, do you want me to wait until the end?
No, go ahead. It's okay. Thanks.
Okay. Mayor Tory, yesterday when there was talk about vaccine and the fact that people in seniors 80 plus in York Region are lining up and getting vaccines, and in Toronto we're not. The answer was that we have a lot more people here, a lot of healthcare workers who in the sort of phase 1 priority group. I'm just wondering if you have any thought if the province should change, if it's allocating vaccine on population, given the disparity between the two regions, should they look at changing that and maybe acknowledging that there are more people in phase 1 here and give us more vaccine because of it?
Well, of course, I would prefer that, only because it would allow us to get on with. We have such huge numbers to look after in the city of Toronto, whether it be the priority healthcare workers and people in long-term care. We have so many more in every category, including so many more, I'll call it ordinary citizens, who are in the different age groups who want to get vaccinated. But having said that, the reality is what it is at the moment, and I don't know that the province is giving any reconsideration to that. So we end up with a certain amount of vaccine based on our population, but that population includes a lot more people in phase one who are frontline healthcare workers, long-term care residents, and people like that. So it just means the day comes a bit later when our 80 plus citizens can begin to get vaccinated. But the day is getting closer at hand. The supply issue is obviously the most important thing, and it's a supply issue that goes beyond the per capita allocation and goes to the general availability of vaccine, and that is something that I know the governments are working very hard to rectify. But I mean, of course, I'd love to see it changed, but I also understand that Toronto operates within the context of a province and a country, and that we do have very special needs that are unique to this city alone in all of the country, and in terms of the numbers of people that are in all these different groups. And I think other people in other governments understand that reality, and they will address that, in discussion with us as they see fit. But of course, I would like to see a change, but it's not something that I've been trying to sort of place a priority on us getting ready to deliver the vaccines we have to deliver, as opposed to that issue just for the moment. And because there are other gating factors too, David, including, as we've mentioned, the registration and scheduling system that is not going to be operable for a couple of weeks. And we have chosen, again, because of the complexity of the city, to operate within that system as opposed to having our own, because we just believe in a city this big and complex, we need a broad-ranging, all-encompassing system to record all this information, as opposed to having a sort of a patchwork of systems that are in place in various parts of the city. So there are other gating factors, and then, of course, including the vital question of supply. So it's just not something that we've focused on. We focused more on getting the most vulnerable groups looked after first, because they were prioritized by the province. That's taking our time and effort for the moment. Getting our clinics up and running, we are going to have more than 300, as we mentioned yesterday, and we'll go forward from there.
David, did you have another question? Just because the first one was a point of clarification.
No, I'm good. Thank you, though.
And then lastly, we have Moment from 680. Go ahead, Moment.
Yes, good morning. Thank you. I just wanted to ask the question about the library. I thought you guys touched on something interesting, and I was wondering if you could just elaborate on. I think when people hear about not charging fines, they'll think that people will keep the books or hang on to them. But you were saying that people actually will maybe return them more because they won't have the fear of the fine and bringing it back. And I was wondering if somebody, either Mayor Tory or somebody from the library, could just expand on that. People willing to bring it back because they're not being fined.
Yes, I'd be glad to speak to that. That has been, there's been research done by the American Library Association, and then the experience of other library systems that have eliminated fines. And that what their experience has been that not only that people who have had their cards unblocked because of overdue fines, and that they have returned to the library to start using the library again, and they've returned long overdue materials as well, because they have felt that if they brought the materials back, that they're going to be in more trouble and more of a fine. So they've held on to them. They haven't come back to the library in person or with their long overdue library materials. So that has been the experience of other library systems. The other thing is that it's really just acts as a barrier to all of the library services, not just in terms of borrowing. So, children aren't coming to story times. They're not coming to use the computers. They're just not coming to the library at all. And so we really want to eliminate the barrier to all of library services, not just to the borrowing component. The last thing I'll just say is that if you keep the books and don't return them at all, you are still going to be charged the value, the replacement value of that material that hasn't been returned. So we're eliminating overdue fines. We're not eliminating fines associated with not returning library materials.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
The human nature comes into play in a lot of this kind of thing. I can well remember with our own kids that it seemed that the longer the books were overdue, the less likely they were to come forward and say there were books that needed to be returned because they were afraid of the consequences. And I think what we're doing here is saying, we're still going to have, with the help of parents and kids, people responsible for returning materials, but they'll be less likely to sort of be afraid to go, and they'll be less likely to afraid to go to the library for fear that somebody's going to come and collar them and say you have some overdue fines, or when they present their card. And so I think this is good, and I hope it is accompanied. I'm sure it will be by a great sense of continuing responsibility on the part of parents and kids for for returning these shared materials, because they are shared. That's really the lesson here. We share these materials with each other, and it only works if we all follow the rules. I think this will help.
Great. And Mayor Tory, if I could just ask you, yesterday York Region opened up their portal for over 80 vaccinations. In the first hour, 20,000 appointments were booked. People were having a hard time. The site was crashing. York Region obviously has a much smaller population, and it was a small segment. Do you can the city of Toronto learn anything from that before we go into our launching, and does that give you any concerns that such a small segment was really bombarding the system in such a short amount of time yesterday?
We had quite a long discussion this morning, and we have learned from that experience just watching on television, because we were even talking about things like the fact that we should have a help desk there, at each of the vaccination sites, to make sure that those who tried to go online and couldn't, or those who tried to phone and couldn't get through, were able to get some help. And we watched the lineups with great concern, because these are older people by definition who are standing in lineups in the freezing cold. And so hopefully the weather will be getting better on a daily basis. But so yes, but it also, I think, reconfirmed something we very, very carefully considered in the months preceding today, which was that we think we are better off as a city, assuming that it works in proper order, being on an all-encompassing provincial registration and scheduling system, as opposed to having what I described earlier on as a patchwork or something we tried to pull together ourselves. The city of Toronto is so complex in this regard. We think we need to be a part of the overall provincial framework for registering and scheduling these vaccinations. And so I think we're reconfirmed in our decision to take part in that provincial system, and in our hope that we can help the province with any of the testing they're doing to get this system up and running as quickly as possible, and obviously in as effective a manner as possible.
Okay, sorry, we've got one more question from David Ryder. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I should have asked before, if this is part of a growing sort of fine-free or ending fine movement. I'm wondering if there's any talk of ending all fines in the Toronto Public Library for adults as well as kids, and if there's been any thought as to what that would cost in terms of finances.
Yes, there has. And in fact, our forecast for the 2022 budget is to eliminate the remaining overdue fines for adults and teens. And currently that creates a budget pressure of 1.4 million in the library's operating budget. And we're working with the foundation. Sorry, we're just working with the foundation to raise money to help mitigate the impact of that 1.4 million in the first year, 2022.
And you will know, David, just following along with that, the library each year, under the very capable leadership of the chief librarian, will come forward to their own board, and then subsequently to the city, with a number of enhanced funding requests to do different things. And this will, I'm sure, be on that list, as the chief librarian has said, for next year. And I can only say that, of course, as is always the case, just like we're here today announcing children's fines being eliminated, we will give due consideration to that, knowing that just like every other year, the 2022 budget year, we're already started on the meetings. It's going to be challenging for a number of reasons, and but it will be given, due consideration by the city and the council at that time.
Okay, that's it for today. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks. Bye-bye, everybody. Thanks again for everything. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.